What if every intimate encounter wasn't just about physical connection, but about the hidden parts of your soul you're secretly offering? When a man shares himself intimately with someone, what does he truly surrender? It extends beyond the physical form, beyond technique. What he gives, often unknowingly, is his essence. A spirit yearning for acceptance, for warmth, for the experience of being selected. But this offering comes masked as passion, as craving, as masculinity. It's not merely skin contacting skin. There exists a profound undercurrent flowing beneath the surface, because fundamentally, a man's genuine longing isn't sexual intimacy. It's to be witnessed, to be understood, to be acknowledged as complete, even within his imperfections. Men who approach a woman's presence with intense focus aren't pursuing sensation. They're pursuing the emotional nourishment they never obtained. It appears physical, but it's spiritual. It looks like desire, but it's generational emptiness disguised as potency. When connection becomes authentic, it reveals the performance and the fragility concealed behind the facade. And it's in that raw instant that depth psychology manifests itself. The physical form as messenger, the hidden self as reflection, but only visible to those courageous enough to penetrate the disguise and descend into the uncomfortable reality. Carl Jung never viewed longing as simple instinct. He saw intimacy as a bridge between realms, the known and the unknown. He stated every intimate act discloses more than it shows. To him, desire doesn't originate in the body. It originates in the psyche. Every motion, every impulse has foundations buried deep in the unconscious. Physical intimacy represents an exchange of vitality, of shadows, of purpose. And when an incompatible woman enters your world, what should have been fulfillment becomes physical, emotional, and spiritual depletion. In this presentation, you'll comprehend why countless men feel hollow after intimacy, why there exists an exhaustion that doesn't stem from the body, it emanates from the spirit. Because each time you yield without awareness, without authentic connection, you're bargaining fragments of your being. For fragments of validation, the female form is sacred, but so is yours. And when two sacred spaces meet without consciousness, energetic disorder emerges. You're not merely engaging physically, you're opening gateways. And not all gateways lead to secure destinations. As this exploration progresses, you'll start perceiving what has always existed, but nobody ever taught you how to interpret. When a man genuinely opens in intimacy, he doesn't merely display his form. He unveils concealed aspects of the spirit, the dread of rejection, the self-doubt he conceals with strength, the quietness heavy with an invisible history. Profound intimacy isn't about physical act. It's about feeling exposed internally, because it's in that gaze, in that pause between connections, that the unseen child emerges, the one who only wanted to be cherished without having to deserve it. And that is more frightening than any physical exposure. How many men in that moment of truth collapse internally while their expression remains composed? The mask of strength doesn't fall through outbursts. It dissolves in stillness. A single connection can awaken the memory of isolation. A minor action can reveal an emotional wound he never learned to articulate. Jung declared the unconscious constantly communicates, and in intimacy it shouts. The body becomes the platform where the spirit performs its concealed suffering. This explains why numerous men retreat when they feel too connected, because facing intimacy means facing the emotional reflection, and not everyone is prepared to see who they truly are. The deterioration of masculine fortitude doesn't commence with a dramatic event. It begins with a solitary touch that penetrates the cracks in the armor, and when that occurs, something internal starts to stir. But that stirring is merely the commencement. Most men matured believing that providing fulfillment was about method, as if it were a demonstration. Execute well, impress her, demonstrate that you're sufficient. But authentic desire, the variety that connects, the kind that touches the spirit, extends much deeper. To provide fulfillment can represent a sacred act, a method to access that forgotten portion of yourself, the part you buried long ago. Because fundamentally, Every man carries a gentle, sensitive aspect, one the world instructed him to conceal. Jung identified that as the feminine within the masculine, and the contradiction is this. When a man genuinely opens in intimacy, he doesn't merely contact her form, he contacts that hidden portion of himself. Sacred fulfillment isn't about command, it's about overwhelming awareness. It's when the body becomes a messenger, an emotional mirror where he sees himself without disguise. And in that ritual of contact, something awakens, something no performance can simulate. This is where desire ceases being merely physical and becomes spiritual. Ritual intimacy doesn't begin in the body. It begins in attention, without language, in permitting that exiled sensitivity to resurge. It's not about demonstrating anything to anyone. It's about reconnecting with who you genuinely are beneath the fractured armor. And when that happens, fulfillment becomes restoration. But for many men, that still feels excessively hazardous. Many claim they want affection, but profoundly what they hunger for is approval. Desire doesn't solely originate from the yearning to connect with another, but from generational deficiency, the desperate need to finally be chosen, as if in every relationship. The invisible child inside awaits someone to declare, "I perceive you, you're significant." And that's where the trap commences. Because when the thirst to be loved exceeds the capacity to love yourself, the man begins to transform. He eliminates himself, he compromises, he sacrifices his spirit for fragments of acceptance. Have you observed that man? The one who does everything, who's always accessible, always considerate, and still, he's overlooked. It's not that he's incorrect. It's that he's caught in an emotional cycle. Excessive consideration is frequently just suffering wearing the mask of virtue. He isn't loving, he's pleading for warmth through the language of performance. And here's where the dark projection commences. He anticipates the other person to rescue him, to save him from his absence of self-love. But that never functions. It requires bravery to look inward and inquire, what am I attempting to demonstrate? Because occasionally, that effort to be the ideal partner is merely a denied reflection of self-worth in disintegration. And when the man comprehends that truth, he starts dismantling the theater of performance. He begins accessing his raw presence, the portion of him that doesn't require perfection to be cherished. But to reach that place, he must confront his own shadow. And it's in that instant that everything transforms completely. Carl Jung once recorded one of the most brutally honest truths in all psychology. What you don't make conscious will manifest in your existence as destiny. And that's precisely what occurs to countless men. They believe they're making decisions, but in reality, they're merely repeating unresolved suffering. The shadow represents the concealed, injured, rejected aspect of the self. It takes control of a man's existence without him even detecting, and thus every relationship becomes a repetition of old trauma, a cycle that never concludes. This explains why intimacy can feel like dangerous territory, not because the other person is harmful, but because the wounds within remain unhealed. He approaches with the mask of strength, but internally he's disintegrating. He looks to the other for a solution to the existential void he has never restored. In this internal conflict, the body becomes either a fortress or a connection. Everything depends on how he faces emotional exposure, as a threat or as an opportunity for restoration. The shadow isn't what you detest, it's what you conceal from yourself. That fear of being vulnerable, that terror of being rejected, that invisible thirst for approval, all of it resides there. In the unconscious, awaiting its moment to emerge. And where does it emerge? In the touch that triggers recollection, in the emotional mirror of intimacy, in the repeated choices that appear coincidental but aren't. Every man, at some point, will project onto the other what he hasn't yet discovered within himself. He observes a woman and, without realizing, transforms her into everything: partner, nurturer, confidant, redeemer. But the issue isn't in loving. It's in expecting someone else to fill what's empty inside. That isn't love. It's the shadow's projection of generational deficiency, a phantom longing for a warmth he never experienced. And that projection almost always concludes in disappointment, because when you place someone on a pedestal, you aren't seeing them. You're seeing the reflection of your own wounded spirit. That idealization becomes an emotional prison, because with the initial error, The entire structure collapses. The man who once projected greatness now feels bitterness. Desire becomes resentment, entirely because he attempted to find externally what he was meant to awaken internally: his dormant feminine, his denied sensitivity, his profound inner presence. It's in this desperate search to feel complete that many men lose themselves. They confuse intensity with love, absence with connection, presence with salvation. But no woman, regardless how extraordinary, can be the perfect reflection for a man who hasn't yet met himself. The emotional reflection starts within, and to observe that exposed reflection demands a courage most men don't possess. And yet, that very courage represents the key to the subsequent step. Most men spend their lives awaiting validation, a compliment, a selection, a gentle touch that states, "You're enough." But the truth, however sharp it might be, is this: that validation never endures, because it originates externally, and whatever comes externally will always depart. Authentic restoration begins the instant a man realizes he no longer needs to plead for warmth, because that thirst to be chosen can only be satisfied when he chooses himself first. Self-awareness represents the key, not as theoretical knowledge, but as living practice, to look inward with raw presence, to listen without language, to confront the existential emptiness without escaping. It's in that place where the spirit lies in ruins that the genuine masculine awakening commences. Intimacy ceases being a performance and becomes a mirror of truth. Desire, when it originates internally, doesn't plead. It welcomes. It moves gracefully. It's an expression of the spirit. That's the moment when physical intimacy transforms into ritual, no longer an escape, but a return, where sacred fulfillment doesn't stem from emptiness, but from wholeness, where the shadow becomes an oracle and stillness becomes wisdom. But to reach that place, a man must pass through the prison of the ego and remove one by one the masks of strength. And in that journey he discovers something the world attempted to bury: his revealed humanity. Not every woman merits access to your form, much less to your vitality. Physical intimacy, when unconscious, becomes an open channel through which your life force can be drained without you even detecting. There exist women emotionally damaged, addicted to turmoil, disconnected from themselves, who carry within them a void. And when you merge with that void, it consumes the most sacred portions of you: your clarity, your strength, your direction. You depart the encounter more hollow than when you entered, and still, you believe it was fulfillment. What she experienced with other men, her emotional dependencies, the unconscious patterns she maintains, all of that is inscribed into her being. And physical intimacy represents the doorway through which those energies enter your existence without requesting permission. You're not merely engaging physically with her form, you're encountering her vitality, her wounds, her unresolved struggles. And if you're not conscious, that fusion becomes contamination. You start feeling weariness, indifference, confusion, and you don't even understand why. This variety of intimacy represents an invisible exchange, but it's devastating. It signifies nothing to possess physical power, artificial confidence, or spiritual quotations in your feed. If in reality you continue opening yourself to women who exist in disorder, it requires energetic discernment, awareness, and a new pattern of choice. Because as long as you keep giving yourself to anyone merely to silence your emptiness, your spirit will remain in ruins, and one day it might never return from where it was taken. Now answer truthfully. How many instances did you give yourself to someone thinking it was merely desire, but left the space more disoriented than before? How many occasions did you confuse fulfillment with connection and surrendered your vitality to someone who didn't even know how to care for her own? The response might pain you, but it could also liberate you. Because from this moment forward, you can no longer claim you didn't understand. You now comprehend that physical intimacy isn't a game. It's a ritual, that the body is a messenger, and every intimate decision you make either reconstructs you or buries you deeper into your own darkness. Now the choice belongs to you. Will you continue offering yourself completely to someone who only desires a fragment of you? Or will you finally begin requiring a level of awareness worthy of your spirit? If this presentation stirred something within you, share which portion resonated with your essence, and if this reached you, distribute it among the men who remain asleep. Subscribe to Psych Seeker, because what we're revealing here extends beyond physical intimacy. It concerns who you become when nobody observes, not performance but presence. Your deepest desire isn't for pleasure, but for presence. Intimacy reveals what performance conceals.